John Warren, publisher of the San Diego Voice and Viewpoint newspaper, coming to you with our program from the desk of the editor. As you know, the Voice and Viewpoint has served the San Diego County for over 62 years in 89 zip codes, 17 cities, the unincorporated areas. We're now available on the internet. We have an app that you can download in the Google or Apple store. You may subscribe by mail, or you may buy us at retail outlets, over-the-counter, and newsstands. And so our slogan has always been, a people without a voice cannot be heard, but at the same time, a people with a voice can indeed be heard. And so we're very proud of this partnership that we have with G.O.D. Radio and Dr. Leonard Thompson. And we're going to have an open mic session here this evening, with the exception of a guest that we were anticipating at the beginning for a small portion of the program. And you may call in, if you like, at 858-251-6111, or you may come in on the internet at godradio1.com. So with that, Dr. Thompson, good evening, and glad to be here with you once again.
Good evening to you, sir. I am going to start the show off just a little tad differently. I keep telling everybody that so much is changing, and in our lifetime, we are literally seeing things that we would never have thought. I never thought that countries and the nations would just stop and have to pause and close shop up. I never thought that. And I actually never, ever thought about London without the Queen. It almost seems weird to say King Charles, because we've been saying Queen all of my natural life.
Yes.
And so I'm seeing everybody's wondering, why are so many people so intrigued, and why are so many people going? And it's really because this is a turn of a century, things that we never thought would ever happen, or never thought it would happen in our lifetime. Like when Barack Obama was elected, for some people that was the culmination, and some of them stopped working instead of gearing it up even more.
That's correct. You're right. And it is an interesting time, because the monarchs are fading or gone. She's the longest reigning one. She represents the second Elizabethan age. And I guess King Charles probably wondered if he'd ever get a chance to be there. And there he is. And I think it's fascinating to watch the British people standing in line. One lady said she stood in line for 6 hours just so she could walk past the coffin, and how they have a sense of family with the king, even with the queen, even though the position was ceremonial, yet it gave an identity, a national identity to the people. Mm-hmm. And we know that a national identity can be very important. We look at America today, and we seem to be losing ours if we have not lost it. I've said that if we had to fight World War II today, we'd lose. Just because of the disconnection, the disenfranchisement, the bitterness, the adversity, and all of the things that are going on in this country. And unfortunately, we have not learned from history, because historians tell us that 21 great nations in the history of mankind have collapsed from within. And we have the kind of turmoil happening here. We're repeating what happened with Rome. And so it's encouraging to watch the people celebrate and remember the Queen, and the identity that they have as subjects, even though that era has basically passed.
And one of the things about it is that, I'm liking how they say the regalia of it all, and loving to see that that not all tradition has gone away. I'm excited to see that there was enough family respect and pride that the brothers put their differences aside, and they have come together. And it's weird, because could you imagine England with Diana as the queen, or the queen consort, is it called?
Queen cohort.
Versus Miss Camilla.
Yeah. Versus Camilla being in that position. Well, you remember now the family, if you look at the history, that family has been on the throne in England for 1,100 plus years. So that's kind of hard to walk away from that kind of history. And there's a lesson in it for us because, if you look at African American people in this country, we're the one group of people on the planet that every effort has been made to destroy our connection with our past.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we know that your connection with your past influences your presence and your future.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot to be learned from that as we have struggled to piece together who we are and where we come from and identify. Um, and we are falling apart too, unfortunately. I mean, because if we look at what we had in the 60s and the 70s and what Roots did for us in terms of a national identity, we're getting back to me, myself, and I,
Mm-hmm.
individual collectivism, the absence of prayer, and all the things that lead to a society's breakdown and meltdown. So I'm very concerned about what I see.
And with that being said, locally we're seeing a lot of African American people and especially men getting high-ranking positions. Um, but do we think even with those high-ranking positions, they will be strong enough to make a change?
Well, no, because I think the era is past that to put a person of color in a position means everybody gets excited. We've reached the point basically that those people are in positions for themselves. 90% of them have always been afraid to act on behalf of their own blackness once they got in positions because they were afraid that people would accuse them of favoritism. And yet that's the very thing that all of their colleagues and predecessors have done.
Mm-hmm.
And so we still have people who don't know how to be themselves, unfortunately.
Well, you look at San Diego right now, and, this is the city that we're in. The city school superintendent, African American. Is it the new for the city of San Diego?
Eric Dargan's the new chief operating officer for the city, is African American, coming to us from Houston, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but this is the third time we've had that. Under the city manager form of government, we had two African American city managers. We've had a black superintendent before, Bertha Pendleton. Back in that day,
we've had a couple of black superintendents. Yeah.
Yes, we have had a couple of black ones,
Mm-hmm.
and she was the first female black one
Yeah.
who had already spent about 40 years in the school district. And then we had Cliff Graves here as the chief administrative officer for the county, which was the first African American to hold that position. And he came to that position from the Office of Management and Budget in the federal government. And when he left, he went off to make a fortune in the bond industry. And that was also a time when we had Leon Williams on the board of supervisors. And so we had the sister that was over the convention center, Carol Wallace. And then we had another sister who came up from Dallas, Texas, and became president of the airport authority.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and not to mention more recently on our exit, Constance Carroll as chancellor over the community college district. So we've had a lot of African Americans take different positions in San Diego. Some have been helpful and made impressions for the benefit of the rest of us, and some have just looked out for themselves and their friends and waited on their checks and left fat and happy.
So as we move forward in this season, younger generation, new people coming in, not all from San Diego, how do we then start holding not only just African American officials, but continue to push the agenda, including those that are in important positions?
Well, that's a very important question, Dr. Thompson, because I'm observing that a lot of the young people, the generation that should be preparing to take our place, their egos and their sense of self-importance seems to overwhelm their concern or acknowledging where they came from and how they got here. Mm-hmm. And I think that's very unfortunate. So many of them are about their own personal gain and agenda, and they just want to use the system, but they are not prepared to sacrifice and to work and to do the kind of things that we and our predecessors did to get to where we are.
How can we say, for instance, we have a lot of young black professionals in positions, and for lack of better words, some of them are a little bit intimidated, a little bit scared because of the fact that they feel like if they get out there and they speak up and they stand up, that they'll find themselves by themselves. How do we protect the people that work for different legislative offices or other power brokers in our community, that when they do stand up, that if they get flashed back on, the flashback from the community leaders will be more prevalent, and will have that person the next time they ever think about flashing to have flashbacks.
Well, I know they wouldn't do it, but for all those young people, I would give them 2 books for their reading list and suggest that they go lock in a closet somewhere and read them. The first one is The Prince by Machiavelli, which helps you understand that as long as you stay connected to the people, you don't have to worry about being expelled from the positions of power. And if you are holding a job and you're more worried about your job than you are what you can do in your job, then you're in the wrong place. Because the day will come when they will come for you, and you will not have any connections or anyone to fall back on. The second book you ought to read is called The Art of War. And The Art of War will help teach you a whole great deal about your interactions with people, because if you are black or ethnically identifiable, as I use the term, because I don't believe in the term minority, then you're going to be engaged in a battle no matter where you work. It's either somebody that doesn't want you there, or somebody wants your job, or somebody is jealous because you have a job. And you've got to know how to deal with all of that while you're still doing the job. And that, of course, leads to stress and all kinds of health issues that now the system wonder why we have such a hard time surviving.
So let me ask you this question, and I think that this is very important, and everybody can chime in. If you don't want to call in, please type your questions or your comments, and we will share them as we go forth. Dr. Warren, time frame. How much time do we give officials or people in key positions to show and develop their hand?
We don't. First of all, the Bible says, to him who much is given, much is required. And if you don't know how to do the job, then you shouldn't be in it. Or if you get in a job and you don't know how to do it, you have to have enough integrity and earnestness of purpose that you want to learn it from the standpoint of being of service and help and doing the best that you can while you're there. And this group is afraid. They're looking for positions and not jobs. And this whole misuse of the term equity is adding to the problem, because equity is not created by putting somebody dark-skinned in a position. Everybody that looks like us is not of or for us. At the same time, we can't be racist in terms of not looking out for other people, because that's the fair thing that we should do.
Okay. So there's a comment here that said they don't live by the Bible. They just sit it on their laptops during election season. Okay.
Yeah, this is true. I was just looking at that comment from the viewer. And I guess the election is a good segue into an up-close example of what we're talking about. We're trying very hard to get people registered, to remind them they need to vote in about 7 weeks in terms of what's coming up, because it's going to impact all our lives. And the more we talk about it, I don't see us reaching for a voter registration card. I don't see us even acknowledging or talking about the election. And yet we're going to be impacted the next 2 to 4 years by what takes place.
Well, Dr. Warren, one of the things I was looking at CNN today, and they were talking about the elections, the primary elections that are taking place, and they talked about the millions of dollars that have been funneled into Georgia to try to overturn and get Herschel Walker as the Republican, I think, senator.
Yeah, running against Warwick.
Yeah, and my question comes in at the point: I want to say it this way, Are we so intoxicated that we don't realize that this election will shape the next 6 years?
I think some people are. You know, we have to remember that the blacks in Georgia have really set an example for us. And Stacey Abrams is running again for governor, and it seems like she's got a kind of a tie race there going. And they have the challenge of getting everybody out. We have to wake up black folks to understand. You look at Herschel Walker, he shouldn't be elected just because you know his name or he played football. I mean, the white Republicans are going to vote for him because he's going to be the kind of house Negro that they need, and they need that one Senate seat to break the Senate hole. And they're embarrassed that they got a Jew and an African American in, and they got the old guard out. And so we gotta make decisions. You know, right here in San Diego, we have a member of Congress that I don't think should be there. She got elected because it was an open term. I'm speaking of none other than Sarah Jacobs, and it's unfortunate. Some of us, we got to vote for Sarah Jacobs, even though, from my standpoint, she hasn't done anything. She doesn't deserve the seat. She's there on her grandfather's money. But the reason to vote for her is that we cannot afford to lose a Democratic seat in the House. Because if we lose enough Democratic seats and it's up for grabs, then the Republicans get the House. And they get the House, Pelosi is out, and the tables are flipped. And so we can't afford to vote personality. I don't like Jacobs, but I got to vote for Jacobs because I don't have anybody else to vote for. We need to maintain Jacobs, Peters, Vargas, and all those members of the Democratic members of Congress so that we can help hold on to the House.
So let me say this. This is one of the things that I don't think that people are paying attention to, and that is they are using the midterm election as a litmus test if Donald Trump should run again. So he's basically have all of these folks running and endorsing them, and if they come out strong, then they're going to say that the Trumpers are back, the MAGA, whatever they call themselves are.
MAGA. You know, Dr. Thompson, even your analogy is late because it's not a litmus test. It was a dry run, number one, and 92% of the trumpeters running out there, the Republicans running on Trump's denial of the election, have won their primary so far.
Yeah.
And they're not just for governor, for Congress, as what happened with Liz Cheney in Wyoming, for Secretary of State, in many of those states where they have vowed to do away with the whole state election scenario so that they can put those false electorates in when the Electoral College people are picked in 2 years for the next presidential election. And the government, you know, everybody's talking about how if Donald Trump was anybody else, with all the laws that he has broken, he would be in an orange jumpsuit looking through some bars. And this idea that you can't indict a president, we're dragging our feet. The judge down there in Florida who blocked the ongoing investigation is somebody that he put in office. And this judge, no one has ever seen the kind of decision that's being made to hold up security. Then when they demand a special master, his people come back and they argue against everything that's put on the table, every person, every selection, every dollar, everything. So clearly this is a stall scenario. And we need to accelerate the indictment in New York, and we need to accelerate the indictment in Georgia, election tampering. And we need to go ahead and charge him with violation of the Espionage Act because historically, anybody who got caught with documents that were classified or top secret, they were tried and convicted and served time. So why are we still waiting around with this just because this fool was a former president? Democracy is going down the toilet while we sit here and look at it, and it's tragic. And we, as African Americans, we got two battles to fight. We got to join the fight to maintain democracy, which we have always been in. We went to war. We've died in every war we've done for this country, in spite of it kicking us, calling us niggas, shutting the door in our face, we still went and died proudly as Americans. And now we got to fight that plus the racism that's trying to resurface through the whole Trump, you know, what do you call it, rebirth of Jim Crow.
Yeah. And I think one of the things about it is that we still have to have a reawakening, and I hate to say it, but it seems like we're really going to have to bombard social media, because it doesn't seem like the younger generation are seeing anything else, and they're missing out. I see more TikToks and more things that has more effort than just getting people out to vote, because vote the way you want to vote, but least vote, and we're not seeing that anymore.
Well, you know, a lot of the education system is collapsing, Dr. Thompson, because we have people today who are no longer learning how to write, curse in school, okay? And we've encountered people young people who say they've never read a newspaper or picked one up, and they think that's okay. I'm blaming parents for a lot of this, because parents have lived through this stuff and know better, and many still have not passed on any sense of responsibility to their children for what they did so they can enjoy what they have. And I think that this is tragic. We've turned our back on God. You know, we don't have prayer. We don't believe in prayer. And now we got this ridiculous thing going where if you mention your name, you gotta use what's the appropriate pronoun. If you're a female, the appropriate pronoun is female. If you're a male, you're a male. All this stuff. His, him, her, his. You know, it's just ridiculous. And this is what happens when a country gets too much freedom. And I think in many respects, people here have too much freedom and no responsibility. And absolute freedom destroys. Okay? We need to reinstitute the draft. We need to require people to step up to the plate. And we're not doing it.
Well, I'm going to take a different perspective on that, the pronouns. And the reason why I'm going to take a different perspective on it is simply this, is that I've seen because, in San Diego, they say we make about 5 to 6% of the people here. I've seen a smaller population in this city have a greater impact and literally have changed so many different things. And I'm wondering to myself, how is maybe a 3% of the population have such a big impact, and we make up more, let's say double that, and yet and still every time we turn around the corner, we have an excuse of why we're not making inroads. They're getting higher jobs. They're literally making it where you're the oddball if you don't use your pronoun, and it would almost be a judgment call. And I began to ask myself the question, what if the Christians took that stance and we all stayed on the same page? What if African Americans would take certain stances and we all stayed on the same page? I believe we would have the same outcomes, but we can't stay on the same page long enough to see any changes.
Well, Dr. Thompson, there's an inscription on the archives in Washington that says, what is past is prologue. We've already done all that you're talking about. It's because we set the tone. We set the tone for the Chicanos. We set the tones for the LGBTQ community. We set the tone for every community that's had a chance to stand up and protest and make demands. I mean, the Cesar Chavez movement was patterned behind us, and the civil rights movement. But our movement was based on prayer, a relationship with God, and a respect for each other, even though we had conflicts. There were battles during the civil rights. It wasn't that everybody came together. One of the greatest fights, and I was there to witness, was when the Big Six had to come together to agree on the March on Washington.
And who was the Big Six?
The Big Six was made up of the NAACP, the Urban League, SNCC, CORE, and there were two other entities out there. And those people in leadership are the ones that came together to organize and make the march take place.
So my question is, of those organizations, what of those big six, how many are still existing?
Well, most of them exist as figureheads today. They're pieces of paper. As one caller was making the observation about how if we came together, unified in voting, we would have an impact. African Americans spend a couple of about $3 trillion a year, and yet we're the only group that I know of in this country who lets all our dollars go out without demanding anything come back in return. Every once in a while, we get group elements that speak up and talk about doing things. We have a group here, Black San Diego, supposedly some 40,000 people on their website and the whole bit, Black Chamber and all that. But yet, even within the Black Chamber, you have people who don't reach out or try to do business with Black businesses. And if you go south, you will find the Asian community, Pacific Islanders, the shopping centers, the stores. If you go, over there by Hoover, you find the Vietnamese, Cambodian, all of these communities. They got their shopping centers. They do business with each other. And then we have a pocket of the African community. They do business, but they won't interact with the Black community here. But for some reason, either they think they're better or they just don't want to be bothered. And so to the outside world, they don't see African, they just see Black. And if you Black from their standpoint, that's part of the problem.
Mm-hmm. So basically, as we move forward, let's fast forward to some of the things that are happening right now, because we're talking about how our dollar does not rotate into our community. How will this new Black Arts District help with that and some of the things that people are talking about purchasing and buying in the communities?
I have no idea because, first of all, we don't own anything in the community, basically. When the Super Bowl first started coming here, it took five people's little restaurants or carryouts just to come together with enough ribs to do a reception. Okay? We no longer have a gas station, cleaners, all these things that we had. We watched them dissipate. Badell Williams was one of the old guys that had a clothing store to the very end over there off of 42nd and Federal. And we don't think in terms of spending money with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And when we come to us, we want a discount, we want a delay, we want to argue, but we don't want to pay what the price is. But yet, when we go into that white store, whatever the price is, that's what we pay. And if we need 50 cents more, they hold it at the counter till we go to the car to get it. So, you cannot legislate people's minds, Dr. Thompson, and people who have no self-love have no self-respect. And if they don't have the self-respect, the only thing that gets to them in the end, like Frantz Fanon made it very clear, when their head is pressed down to the ground and their nose is turned to the dirt and the foot of the oppressor is on their neck so that they got to struggle to live, then they will unify.
Okay.
And that's why we unified through slavery, Jim Crow segregation, because at the end of the day, we all understood that no matter how many laws were passed at the time, the system said we were just still niggers, and they still saw us as niggers, and we understood who we were and why we had to pull together to make things better.
And so do you feel, from your perspective, that we as a community still feel that we are niggas?
Let me just say this again. It's got to be important because I don't want this conversation to be like I was just against everything. We still have pockets of young Black people. They used to say, "And the strong keep coming." We still have a whole slew of them that are committed, that are getting educated, that are learning, that are out there trying to do things. And so too often they get wiped away with the protests that we express over the ones who aren't doing anything, the troublemakers and the ones standing in the way. But I believe that oppression is a good teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that what we're going through right now in this country is a teaching scenario. Inflation, the pandemic. The pandemic is a good example where you and I have talked about this. Right here in San Diego County, Still, only 45% of the African Americans in this county, and we only about 3% are vaccinated.
Mm-hmm.
And we got people getting sick and dying. In the state of California, 36 to 40 people are dying every day from COVID-19 and the related stuff. And yet, we have people who can give you all kinds of reasons that they're smarter than the scientists or the sister that developed the vaccine and all of these people because of their pride and their ego. And so, the Bible says pride goeth before a fall. And we can't make people be concerned if they're able to remain apathetic with no consequences.
So moving forward, let's say it's simply, some people have 10-year plans, 20-year plans, 100-year plans. If you were to say in the next 3 years, we're going to use the Trinity right now. In the next 3 years, what could we put in place and do to start bringing a unity and a togetherness among African American people?
Well, every once in a while, a group will spring up and say that they represent San Diego's black community, which is a lie. They will spring up and say, we're all about unity, and yet half of them are not speaking to half of us who are out there every day trying to do something. They come, they bypass us, they stand on the shoulders of what we've done, and they hold themselves up as now they the new great black hope. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that these people are capable of change until they run into some kind of personal conflict and crisis.
So let me ask you this question. You work for the late, great Adam Powell.
Yes.
Was he, when you worked for him, was he sweet and kind and held your hand and wooed you and said and showed you the ropes, or was he tough? He was direct. He to prepare you for what you were dealing with.
He didn't consciously prepare me for anything.
Okay.
In reality, in many ways, Adam was a real bastard. Okay, and I say that because the public perception of black people in leadership wants to worship them, but the private perception, often in terms of how they deal with their own people, is embarrassing. And this year the Congressional Black Caucus celebrates its 50th year, and I was there for the first 35 when there was only 17 of them, and they couldn't get together unless it was for a photo op. And so, but when people get in trouble, that's when they turn to the masses. Powell was brilliant, and many times you learn from people by what they don't do as much as you learn by what they do. He was a person who, if you stop and look at it, in 6 years of chairing education and labor, he passed 60 major pieces of legislation, a feat that has never been equaled or surpassed by any chairman in the history of the U.S. Congress. Mm-hmm. People don't know today when you have the Arts Commission, intergovernmental personnel, school lunch, all of these different programs, never leave one behind. He did all of these things, minimum wage, all kinds of benefits. OSHA, all of these things came, equal employment opportunity. They came under his watch. And so you learn in terms of watching a person who was strong, independent, had power, knew how to use it, but he didn't necessarily turn around and extend a helping hand to the people who were closest to him. Mm. Okay? Yeah. I can say the same thing about Shirley Chisholm. We put her up on a pedestal. I work for Shirley Chisholm. Shirley Chisholm did a lot of good. But all of them, like all human beings, there are things that they could have done that would have made a big difference that they didn't do. And so we don't dwell on that because all of us have things that we could have done, but that we haven't done or aren't doing.
And the reason why I said that and asked that question is what I'm seeing in today's up and coming leaders is that their skin is very thin, and they get bruised and hurt and wounded so easily that even though you're trying to guide and help and teach, they get into their feelings and they go and they kind of take their toys and go home. How do we toughen up our up and coming leaders?
Well, see, that's the problem. we don't toughen them up. We replace them. We replace them with people who have demonstrated in the trenches that they have a commitment and a concern for all of us in terms of what's taking place. You know, leaders are going to always be hurt by the people that they lead. And history has shown that the people
wait a minute! You can't just drop that nugget and not say it again, because that was a very, very powerful statement.
leaders are always going to be hurt by the people that they lead.
Okay.
You know, that Judas hurt Jesus. Okay, Gandhi was killed by the people that he led in the times of India. You know, if you just go across the board, Malcolm was killed by people that have been part of those that he led. And so we're going to have that. The key is that when we look at great leaders, their commitment and their vision for what they were called to do is greater than their concern about their own survival and the personal toll that it takes upon them. And see, that's the key, because the people today, you know, I've been in a position as an elected official where I had to cast a difficult vote, and there was nobody for me to go talk to but God in terms of which way do I go. And there are people on both sides of the room going to get mad and raise hell. In the end, you do what's right. You take the consequences. And that's what I admire about Liz Cheney in Wyoming. You know, and I've never been in love with Republicans, but good things can come out of all people. But she made a commitment to what was right, and she knew it would cost her, but she was willing to pay the price which she's paying in terms of that seat. And she's not going to be homeless. I mean, her family's going to be all right. You know, you can't mention Wyoming without mentioning Cheney. But the bottom line is, the young people today, they don't have the respect, they don't have the God commitment, they don't reflect a concern that goes beyond checking the wind too often for which way they should go.
Okay. And so, and moving forward, you know, we began to look at, you know, leadership. We begin to look at, and I have to say, a lot of times we focus on the young folks, but we have a lot of seasoned folks that are in position that are not really fighting the good fight. They're fighting a good pension.
Oh, yeah, we do. And, you know, that's a very interesting statement, Dr. Thompson, because we have to look at why we're seasoned folks. I remember, you know, some 50 years ago when I was running for office, and I was going door to door, and I knocked on this door one day asking for support. And this man came to the door. He signed my petition. He gave me a contribution. And he said, son, he says, I've been where you are, and I'm not going to go back there. But I applaud the fact that you're making the effort, and I wish you well. A lot of the people who already went down that road, they got burnt out, they got burnt, they lost, they paid tremendous personal prices and sacrifice for what they did. And so those are some of the people we see today. They are tired. I don't think we just throw them out. I think that if we stop and talk to them, we can learn some things from them.
Okay.
You know, we could learn. There are people older than me that I try to talk to with respect from the standpoint that I can learn what they're doing. And I think that this just makes a big difference. My grandfather once told me, and I never forgot this, because he was always dropping these little nuggets on me. And he said to me one day, out of the clear blue, he said, you know, let me tell you something about old people. And I said, what's that, Big Daddy? That's what I call him. He says, I want you to remember that old people don't get old being stupid. Okay? Laughing. And if you think about it, you know, it's all kinds of little things that I thought about old people. You won't be able to sit in the room and put a fan on an old person. They'll tell you, I don't want that fan on me, because they realize too much of that air is not going to be good for them, you know?
Yeah.
They're going to wrap up and they're going to do certain things, and we can learn. We can learn. We don't have to throw it out. You know, we used to see Ebenezer Scrooge at Christmas time, the last Christmas Carol, and we see this guy in his nightgown with this cap on his head, you know, and we grew up laughing at it. And why is he wearing that cap? And you look at this commercial with the aisle for the glasses, and he's got a cap. Well, if you stop and think about it, if people go to bed, used to go to bed with sleeping caps. Their rooms weren't as warm as ours, but heat escapes through your head, so the cap keeps the body temperature. and keeps. It's just little things we can learn from people, and we got to stop being in the. So many young people, if you they won't take time with how they speak, and I blame those of us who are older who let them speak to us with disrespect. I'm not gonna let you disrespect me in talking to me. And it ain't gonna happen because I paid the price to be here. You just got here, so I think that we need to. We're responsible for how we get treated.
Yeah.
Those who can still stand up and do something need to look out for those who can't.
Well, one of the things I do love about, in your correction, I believe you give everybody one good shot.
Oh yeah.
You give everybody one good shot, and you'll politely say, "Now, son, you can't call me by my first name."
No.
And you give them that one shot, and if they don't get it, the next time it's a little bit more directed and focused.
Oh, it's got to be, because, and it's not ego. And I've been at the White House, and my wife almost squeezed the blood out of my hand because, somebody will speak to me and look at my name tape and won't call me John. And my position, we're not friends.
Yeah.
If I look at your take, I'm going to call you Dr. Thompson because I'm from the South. That's the way I was raised, that you respect people. I still say ma'am and sir when I speak to folks. I know that's old-fashioned and outdated here, and this group could care less about it. But you know what? An old lady once told me that manners will take you a long ways. And there's nothing wrong with being polite and respectful. We're probably one of the few cultures on the planet that does not respect our elders and learn from them. Every other life form on the planet learns from its elders, and we're the only ones coming here thinking we know everything.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things about it is that, I'm still holding out hope that this generation that is coming up, that we still have some really great young people that are coming through.
Oh, we do.
And I'm looking to wrap our arms around these young people as they begin to, I don't ever say replace us, but elevate to where we can move to a place of guidance and rest versus having to carry the burden all of ourselves. And I think it's so important that they say if you know your history, you know your greatness, and that we don't archive everything. And what I mean by archive everything, okay, we got the paper online, so we don't need to have the print. But there is something about holding the paper and reading. I to this very day, as tech savvy as I am, it bothers me to read a Kindle. It literally, I can't do it.
No. And here's something on what you're saying, Dr. Thompson. All of the events that get covered in the community and people put clips up on social media, but when we go back and cover the event and put it in the paper, the pictures, the story, people come and buy the paper in large numbers because they want something tangible that they can hold as a souvenir and a momentum. And they can't do that with what's online electronically unless they're printing out everything.
Well, see, that's the funniest thing. They still go to that hard copy, even if they print it out. But can I tell you the reason why I can't read on Kindle?
Why?
Because I'm a page counter. and I like having the book where I could see how much more is got to be left in the story. But on Kindle, you don't get to feel or see that. And so you just feel like you're reading in oblivion.
Well, that's interesting because I don't like reading on electronic devices because I mark up, make notes and everything when I'm reading. And even when I'm teaching as a pastor and I'm doing a Bible study or a message, I pass out pads and pencils to people so they can take notes. And when I've sat under people like T.D. Jakes or, some of our great biblical teachers, my father in the ministry, Apostle Hilliard out of Houston, I sit in those messages, I can get the tape, but I'm taking notes the whole time as if I'm in school because there's something about, and they've proven it scientifically, there's something about your hand and eye contact in your brain that helps you remember more than just a flash or something that goes across your visual screen. And so we know there was a time a lot of our young people couldn't read. We have adults that had reading problems, I grew up in a household where my father's parents had died before he was 6, and He never got to go to school. He couldn't read or write, but he had what they call mother wits, and he did well enough to get through the world with the handicap that he had. And so we're challenged to do better. We're challenged to help others. That's what we're here for, to be of help. And I don't care, in a sense, how many people like or dislike me, but my goal is not to be liked. My goal is to be of service, because that's what I'm going to be judged by. That's what you're going to be judged by. And when we get our young people to understand that it's more what you do than what you say, it's what you do rather than how you look. It's what your heart has in it, in terms of compassion for others as opposed to just self. Makes a difference.
Yeah, and I want to, I'm looking, it will take anyone with mother wit over, I'll take anyone with mother wit over MBA. Okay, people who have visual problems are grateful to Kindle because they can enlarge the print and finally read. True, and I thank God for Bible Gateway.
Yeah.
Because in a crunch, you can blow that thing up so big that you can read it from across the room.
Yes. But we need to let people know that mother wits, because a lot of people don't know what that term is. And mother wits is another name for common sense and the wisdom that a lot of people acquired just by waiting and listening before they spoke. And they observed where they were and the things around them. It was so important in the South, where you could be hung, shot, or executed just because of how you looked at a white person, or because you raised your head, or because you gave an answer that was considered uppity, quote unquote. And so it's another word for wisdom, that you learned to be kind of wise in what you say. There's a parable I like to give about a sheik who had a son that he sent him out into the world. He sent him to school to get educated because he wanted him to be able to take his place. And on his way there, he stopped in this village, and there was an old wise man that was teaching. And he listened to the wise man for a few minutes, and then he decided, like a lot of young folks, oh, you don't know what he's talking about. So he gets up and challenges the wise man, saying, you know what, you need to shut up. You're all wrong on everything. And when he did that, the people listening to the wise man, they jumped on him and beat him up and sent him away raggedy. So after he got his education, he was coming back, and he stopped in the same village, and the same man was teaching as he was before. This time he approached the wise man, and he said this to him. He says, "Oh, great wise one, we're so fortunate to have you with us. May I please have a hair from your beard to remember your greatness?" And it sparked the idea to the listeners, and everybody wanted a hair from his beard. And so they attacked him to get one. The idea, old folks used to say, when you hear that, they would say, there's more than one way to skin a cat. Okay. And so whatever the problem is, there's a solution if we stop and think about it. But the solutions often weighed the extent to which they either hurt or harm other people. We didn't structure solutions just around what was best for us. And so that's what we have to return to, the collective. When Jesse Owens embarrassed Hitler by winning that race after he had talked about how black people were inferior, everybody black celebrated Jesse Owens. But few of us celebrate or remember what happened after he came back home. Because when the Olympic was over and the greatness was gone, he used to have to do things like pull a plow or race against a horse and do all kinds of degrading things because there was no way for an ex-black Olympian to earn a living like today.
Exactly.
And so we need to think about that, about if we helping other people, we making provision. What's our motto, Brother Thompson? Our prayer for Black Men and Women United is what? To seek to serve rather than to be served.
Yes. I thought you was going to ask about the voice and viewpoint. People without a voice can't be heard.
Well, those who read will get that, and those who get in trouble find it too eventually.
I want to end off with this, and this is kind of like a food for thought and some warning, and that is the death of rapper PNB Rock. He was fatally shot at Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles in L.A. when they went to attempt to rob him. And one of the things that I think more than anything else is to learn is that you have to be careful how you post where you're at, because it was the posting that he was there that led the people to try to get to him. And social media, everybody's always trying to be social media said, this is what I'm doing. But many times, even all the celebrities are now knowing when you post, you're literally telling people where you're not.
Yeah.
And so they've been going and breaking in folks' houses and
Yep.
everything else because you done told them, I'm at this big gala, I'm over here, I'm over
Yeah.
there. I tell folks all the time, when you post when you're already back home. You know what I'm saying? So
If you have to post at all.
if they're gonna come a knocking, you're gonna be able to answer the door versus they're like, oh, they ain't gonna be they over there in the Bahamas having a good time. And it's really sad because, and this is one of those things for me, when they said he was shot at Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles, the first thing I said, I know it wasn't on Pico, I know it wasn't in Beverly Hills,
Yep,
it had to be on Manchester.
Yep.
And lo and behold, it was on Manchester. You know, and I tell people all the time, you know, Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles is not a bad place.
No.
You know, but people will do bad things
In good places.
in good places. And so I just want to encourage you guys, don't be so quick to post everything that you're doing, because sometimes people are tracking you and following you and will try to make impacts in your life when you least expect it, and you wonder why you have stalkers or people that are following you and telling you all about your life.
Well, you know, I agree with you, Dr. Thompson, and I think that we have a number of things that keep happening here in San Diego. We got issues with how people are being treated in jail, custody deaths. We still got issues with the police. You know, it's called living while black in terms of them stopping people. We have a chance still to register, to get ready to vote, to make a statement by our numbers in terms of turning out. And we're not just talking about District 4. We live all over San Diego County. We live in all of these different districts. We have a chance to hold hands and reach out to the people here. We have a chance to reach back our family and loved ones in other cities and look at what they're going through, what kind of challenges they have. And I always remind us that there are only three things that corporate America understands. And many times when I say corporate America, it really embraces white America. It understands lost profits, bad publicity, and a vote cast against their interests.
Yeah.
Now, we might not be able to affect the large profits of a multi-million-dollar corporation, but no entity can withstand bad publicity on a sustained basis.
Yeah.
And we have gotten to the point that when we get upset, people treat us like the soda, that you put your thumb in the bottle, you shake it, and they know when they move the thumb, the fizzle is going to go. They think that we're going to go. But we need to look back. You know, let's remember the Montgomery boycott and how those people walked and lost their jobs and everything because they pulled together. It don't have to be a lot of us. There are enough of us in San Diego County to make a difference. Right now, you got less than 100 black people here doing everything in the whole county. If you imagine that people could come together, decide that I'm going to be committed to the extent of having some inconvenience in my life, that I'm going to give up something so that I can help someone. We got all these homeless people here, and we're acting like it doesn't count. We got a battle going, as you know, through Black Men and Women United. We're trying to get data on all of the discriminatory practices against black homeless folks downtown when white people are being treated differently. We got discrimination in health care, that black people are being treated differently. And if it's up to, even if it's just a few of us can make a difference if we pull together. Unfortunately, I'm going to say it, I still got too many black people here who consider themselves leaders, who won't pick up the phone, who won't talk to anybody other than their own little group. And to all of you people out there who think like that, I want to remind you of an old Indian saying, he who leads where no one follows merely goes for a walk. And there's a whole bunch of y'all walking around out there when you should be getting involved in terms of how can you do something to help somebody. That old spiritual, my living won't be in vain.
Yeah.
Okay?
And can I end off with a food for thought?
Yes.
And this is simply this. So many times we celebrate the athlete, but we don't celebrate the scholar. I'm encouraging all the high school athletes to be celebrated, but let's celebrate them also as scholars. And let's also celebrate the scholars at the same level that we celebrate the athletes. We've been seeing in the newspaper about top athletes because it's football season, but no one's talking about the top scholars. And soon they have to apply for their colleges. And you have had kids that have poured their self into their work. And I just want to say, I'm encouraging schools and leaders all over. Let's start having pep rallies for the scholars. Let's start having pep rallies for the kids that make the dean's list. Let's start having pep rallies for those kids that are winning debates and getting into the STEM programs and things of that nature. Let's celebrate them on the same level or even more than we celebrate the athletes. Because at the end, an education will take them further than just carrying a ball.
Well, I'm going to say something here, Dr. Thompson, because sometimes people don't realize the greatness among them. You know, you were an athlete. You almost made if you didn't, the finals for an Olympic team in the martial arts, and yet you went to Berkeley on an academic scholarship. All right, and so I think that's significant. But you don't walk around being pretentious about it. You know, a lot of us went to HBCUs, but it's not where we went; it's what we do with what we got from where we went.
And you want to hear something? This is a real true statement. I wish that I would have had the knowledge of the power of the HBCUs when I was. We'd never heard about it. Literally, you literally heard about all the Ivy League schools and everything, but nobody talked about Hampton and Howard and Morehouse. You know, now back south they might have, but not in California. But then they can, and I have to say this, a lot of people might say, well, it's not that, but it wasn't until a different world that a lot of us began to finally see black colleges and wanted to start going.
Yes.
And I think that that's a travesty that we can't continue to let happen. We must celebrate the best and the brightest because they are producing phenomenal leaders, more PhDs than any other university. And we need to celebrate, not because it's just a black university, but it is a powerhouse in education.
Well, I want to say that, I come from Howard twice.
Let's say HU.
All right. And I am so proud of the Howardites in San Diego. When I look at them, they're judges, they're scholars, they're committed to doing things in the community, they're helping people, and they span generations, doctors, people who came through the old school and the hard times. And I think it's important. I'm equally as proud, though, that I went to graduate school at USC.
Yeah.
Because I learned things there. And so many of our kids need that black experience. That's why we used to do Gold Coast, to bring that black experience here. And so, but we can still learn and help each other, and we can still build on the foundation that so many of us received.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping to see that, and I'm hoping to see us get reinvigorated so that we can go back. We didn't get call-ins, but we got a lot of comments, and we enjoyed reading your comments and having this conversation. And we invite you to come back again next week.
And we're going to continue to bring you great conversation. And we're going to have some guests come on that are really going to shock y'all. Y'all better get your questions ready.
Yep.
Stay tuned. Pick up the San Diego Voice and Viewpoint. Make sure you tune in to GODradio1.com and know that we're going to give you the best information that we have at our fingertips. Until next week, be blessed.